Mother Clare of the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal. But what is it's congregation of the
Community
community
of the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal, yeah.
Okay.
That's what the C is. Yeah, people often wonder what the C stands for. Yeah.
Well, you were on Life in the Rock, and we just want to do a podcast with you I wanted to hear your personal vocation story. You're raised Catholic, devout home, surrounded by love and goodness all the way, or how did that go?
Sure. Happy to share it. So yes, I was raised in a Catholic home. Both my parents are devout Catholics, and they're both converts to the faith. My father converting when he was a young teen in Germany as a 14-year-old, and my mother converting after marrying my father. But us 4 children in our family were raised devoutly Catholic. But my father was in the military, and so I grew up moving around a lot and always going to school on base. And I just bring that up because I never really thought about religious life growing up, and I sometimes wondered after the fact, why is that? Why did I not really ever consider it? And I think in part was not going to Catholic school, not being taught by religious. Not that people that go to Catholic school are usually taught by religious anymore anyway. But I guess I wasn't very exposed to religious life growing up. And then also perhaps because my parents weren't exposed to it because they were converts. That was another reason. So who knows why? But I didn't have much exposure. So I grew up wanting to be all the things that kids want to be, an actress. I went through a long stint wanting to be an actress. And
did you do plays and stuff?
Yeah, I did drama in high school? And
like a lead role and stuff, or?
Well, no, I can't say I ever had a lead role, so it probably wouldn't have made much of that dream. I probably wouldn't have gone too far. But all different things. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a missionary. All kinds of dreams. And then when I went away to college, and I went to Franciscan University in Steubenville.
And what made you want to go there?
That is a great question, Father Mark, because it's almost like a pure miracle that I wound up there, honestly. Because I was in Germany at the time, in Mannheim, Germany, on base. It was where I graduated from high school. I had never met one person that had gone to school at Steubenville. I simply had heard about it. And then I'm at that point of making a college decision, which was pretty big because I was going to be leaving my parents on one continent, my whole family, coming back to the States and starting school. So it was just a bigger thing than driving to the local state school or something. It was a real leaving of home. And so I thought, well, I should probably go where we have family, since my immediate family is all still going to be in Europe for a good few more years. So I should go where my grandmother is, or so I have somewhere to go at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I said, well, let me go to Ohio, where my extended family is from. And then I thought, having never gone to Catholic school, I thought, now that's a novel idea. The Catholics all get together and go to school together. I really thought that way, sincerely. I thought, that is so novel. What a great idea. Yeah. And I thought, I want to try that. I want to see what that's like. So I want to go to a Catholic school in Ohio, and I found Steubenville. Yeah. And I applied. And the interesting thing about it, and which I found funny now, is that I remember praying, because I had already had a conversion experience. I remember praying that it would be truly a Catholic school. That's how little I knew about it. It's the premier Catholic school. It's like
right.
And I had no idea. So I wind up there and think, like, where am I? This is incredible. This is incredible.
Let me ask you something. Was it hard moving around a lot when you were growing up?
It is hard. It is hard. I always I'm on the type, I look at the bright side, and I always tell you 10 positive things and why it's so great. But the truth is, it's challenging, because you're always, as a child, there are good things about it. There are good things. But it is challenging. You're always saying goodbye. You're always being torn from very fundamental people in your life. Yeah. Your best friends. Now, luckily, as a young child, the most fundamental people are mom, dad, and your brothers and sisters, and you're always with them. So that's good. Yeah. But no, it is hard. And our extended family was always over the ocean, and we were always when it was my father that was in the military. So when Dad is reassigned, we were separated for about 6 months, or sometimes 8 months. Which some people in the world have it much harder than that. But for children, that's really hard. And I remember being a young child at one point. It was actually a terrifying experience, because I remember thinking we were in one of those separations because it was a move, and the service person goes first, the family comes much later. And I remember thinking, I can't think of my dad's face.
Mm.
I can't remember his face. And it was frightening to me.
Yeah.
But it's just because the separation was so long.
Right.
And so, yeah, there are hard things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've seen some of those videos where the soldier comes home and the kids at school, and he surprises them. It's always so beautiful to see their reaction. You know, like they just forget about embarrassment or whatever. You know, they just go right to the father, and it's always nice.
Beautiful.
But is it like harder maybe to make friends, or you kind of learn to maybe a little bit more independent, or I don't know, is that true, or you think? Or?
Well, you know, I definitely became very independent, so I do wonder if that's part of it.
Yeah.
But it is also easy to make friends. If both are true at the same time, because in a military school and in a military environment, all the kids are in the same boat.
Oh, okay.
So either you're the one moving and re-entering somewhere, or they are. But there's a kind of a sympathy.
Right. Right.
At least I saw it that way.
Yeah.
Or at least enough of friendship, you know, to get through school.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Enough of friendship to get through school. Yeah. So, you know, luckily there were always youth groups and things. And in fact, that's a big part of my high school years, was being part of really dynamic youth groups that provided, you know, really great friendships and really great, you know, kind of a body of people.
And before Steubenville, though, you said you had a spiritual kind of conversion? Or?
I did. So even though, you know, I'm raised in a Catholic home, so I went to Mass every Sunday. We never missed Mass, and said grace before meals and prayed before we went to bed at night. So that's what I mean by a devout Catholic home. My parents were believers, and we had, you know, kind of certain measured aspects of faith in our home. So kind of a typical Catholic family. But what happened to me was I went, in one of these mini moves, we moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And my parents always made it a point that we went to whatever Catholic functions were going on. So there was a parish picnic, and we went, and my sister and I, who's 2 years older than me, we were noticing these signs for a retreat that was coming up. And I was a bratty 13-year-old or 14-year-old at that point, and thinking, oh, I don't want to have to go to this stupid thing. And I was very negative and a little bit obnoxious. And, you know, mom is going to sign us up and the whole thing. So we did get, you know, forced to go. And sort of there were 65 other young people. And that retreat is what really opened me up. That retreat had a really big impact on me. And it's interesting because it wasn't one of these big retreat movements or a kind of a formalized movement in the church, which are wonderful, but it was just simply a group of parents in the parish who were recognizing the fact that we're losing the kids here. Like the kids are not really believing in the faith, and they were really concerned about their own kids and just youth. And they got together and they started praying, and they decided to just pull together a retreat. So it was like a shoestring kind of thing. And on the Saturday night of the retreat, they stood up. I think 6 or 7 of these just adults, normal parents, stood up and just shared from the heart who Jesus was to them. I will never forget. I sat in the very back because I was like really hardened and kind of closed to everything, and I was putting off this appearance like I'm too cool for this kind of thing. But I was really listening, and I mean, I was just attitude. My face just screamed out, "I've got an attitude. Don't come near me." And Yet I heard every word, and it touched me because I remember thinking, these people are talking about Jesus like they personally know him, like they talk to him every day. And of course they did talk to him every day, but this was new for me. I mean, we went to Mass, but my parents didn't speak about Jesus as if they knew him. Now they know him in their own way. I'm not being critical of them. They knew him in their own way, but there was something different. So I went back to my bunk.
And these were the retreat leaders?
Yeah.
Okay. They're like young adults? I think, or?
Well, they're just sort of normal. It's hard to say now. So I would have been 14 or so, and they probably were late 30s, mid 40s. Okay. Some of them maybe 50s even. But just parents. They're just like parents. And so I went back to my room, my bunk in this camp in the middle of the woods in Tennessee. And I remember at least thinking, I'm not even sure I was really praying, you know, but just at least thinking these thoughts, reflecting that, first of all, that they seemed to know something and have something that I did not have. And I remember thinking, I want to know God like that. I want to know God like that. And that that started to change everything. And what changed for me was I started to pray, and I started to really pay attention. So meaning I always went to Mass. I could not go to Mass, but now I went to Mass, and I remember just being just heightened in attention. So everything that's happening, I mean, the readings are being read, and I am listening. I am so aware. And I remember specifically when the Creed was prayed that next Sunday, standing there at Mass, and as each phrase of the Creed, as we were saying that together as a congregation, I remember thinking to myself, do I believe that? Do I believe that? And I remember answering interiorly, yes. And I think it's probably the first time I ever prayed the Creed with a very, very, very conscious attention, but also an assent. I remember consciously assenting to the Creed. And then from there, it grew. And it grew through prayer, and then getting involved in a prayer group, and et cetera.
So like the fruit of the retreat was kind of a desire? It wasn't, did you actually experience something very powerful there?
Well, good question, Father Mark. It was certainly desire. And no, and there was no kind of like charismatic experience of like the presence of God or a movement of the Spirit within me. Nothing like that at all. It really was desire. And I would even say maybe faith, because I started to believe it was possible. You know, that not that I had doubted it before, I just didn't know I wasn't awakened to this possibility. But even as I wanted it, I somehow knew it was possible. So it's kind of like faith. And then the third thing was the desire to be a saint, even because as it went on the next day and as more things were happening, I got in touch with a desire to be a saint, like not a canonized saint, you know, but just to be holy, you know, to be close to God. There is a God. I want to know him and be close to him somehow. I didn't verbalize any of that. And I mention that because, you know, a lot of adults that might be listening might be involved in parish ministry to young people in some form. And, you know, I was that obnoxious kid in the back of the class that looks like they're not paying attention, who, you know, really doesn't have a word to say. And they really opened it up for sharing, but I wouldn't say a word. But I mean, obviously I point to that as the retreat that changed my life. Those people that ran it probably have no idea that I was changed forever by what they did.
Yeah. Where in Tennessee was it?
It was called Camp Christian. Was the location, but we were all military families at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
You gotta look them
So
up.
if anybody out there listening was one of the leaders, changed my life. It would have been around 1989.
So you get to Steubenville, and what happens there? You had a great experience.
I sure did have a great experience. So Steubenville, of course, is years later after that, but I get there. I'd been praying. It was a Catholic school. My family's all in Germany now. I'm just blown away. The Blessed Sacrament is in almost every building on campus. I was blown away by this. Mass offered 3 times a day, confessions. I just had never experienced Catholic culture and sacramental life like this before. So I couldn't believe it. I was pinching myself every semester, like, where am I? Is this real? You know, so it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, just surrounded by the faith, and it was nurturing. And
well, I guess we should back up. Like, well, did that experience, and after the Creed, did you take up greater prayer in your high school years? And
I did, straight through high school. So I started, I didn't know how to pray. I had no one guiding me. I didn't know how to pray. But I started I got a Bible. I thought, if God has one book, I'm going to read it. So I started at the beginning, like you're not supposed to do, and plowed through by sheer willpower. I mean,
see, I tried to do that a few times in my life, but I couldn't get through Leviticus.
Yeah, I mean, I got through Leviticus at night, and I'm like 14 years old, and I'm like, do not boil the goat in the blood of its mother. And I'm like, God, like, I have no idea, but just keep going. So I persevered through that. It's just a sheer act of probably pride or willpower. I don't know.
Or the German in you? Is that
yeah,
the German?
probably so. So I plowed through that. And then I also started to pray. So that was reading the scriptures was the beginning, but also starting to pray. And I had a notebook, and I would just write my prayers out. Dear Jesus. You know, and I just write out what was in my heart, what was in my mind. And I learned to pray that way, really. That was the beginning.
Okay. And extra masses, or you went to confessions? And
no idea about confession. Now, I didn't know about confession, And we went as a family during Advent at the penance service that the parish would offer and during Lent.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until college, and they were offering confessions all the time, that I even realized you could go outside of Advent and Lent. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
It was, here I'm at Steubenville where everyone is so devout and so sacramental. And I'm like, it's not Lent. It's not Lent. Like, what's going on here? You know, like, you mean you can go to confession? It was news to me.
Well, yeah, I didn't know you could go to daily mass. I remember one time we missed mass. We were on a vacation as a family, and we went that Monday. And I was like, "What? They have mass on?"
Yeah, there's mass other times than Sunday. What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I learned a lot, and I started going to confession a little bit. But I had to even learn to go to confession, like how to even examine my conscience. Like, what do you even, you think like, what am I possibly doing wrong? I'm not killing anybody, So that was a slow learning. I've had a priest laugh at me in the confessional. I had another priest tell me, like, well, that's the tip of the iceberg. And I was like, whoa, thanks a lot, buddy. So, little by little, I got a formation in these things. And yes, I started going to daily mass. This was another grace, because having gone from certainly Sunday mass my whole life, but as soon as I got on campus, again, with no instruction or anything other than the Holy Spirit himself, who was always guiding me, I just started going to daily mass. Like day one, I just started going to daily mass. It was like, I'm going. And I went to daily mass, and I slowly started going to confession more frequently when I got to chisel away that iceberg a little bit. And so that was my formation. It was a profound formation for me.
And did you have like a charismatic experience, or?
I did. So to back up again, after that retreat experience that opened me up and starting to pray, I learned from those same people that there was this prayer group, and I got invited to it. Would I want to come to this prayer group? And my sister and I said, sure, we'll go. And it was all people our parents' age, but we went to it. And that was really beautiful. And I was prayed with there, and that also enhanced my life of prayer and my openness to God there through that. And that fueled my reading of Scripture. And I did receive some significant graces at that time. They offered baptism in the Holy Spirit at that, which is simply being prayed over for a stirring up of the Spirit, which I received. Now, unlike many people, I did not have a profound sensational experience. I didn't really sense anything in my person, and yet I knew something happened. And as I look back on it now with all the education I have now, I can see it was an unfelt graces, but it gave me the grace of prayer. And I think some of that perseverance in prayer came through that. Right. Also, praying in the gift of tongues came later on, not immediately upon being prayed over. And I also think the gift of prayer, I mean, like not just taking a prayer time, but praying with others. I saw that immediately manifest, and I didn't know at the time, oh, this is God giving me a gift. Only later could I look back and see, oh yeah, when people come to you, want you to pray, or could recognize there was a gift of prayer there, that was God. God gave you that when you know what I mean? Right, so I can see now different graces that came, although it was completely unsensational. Wow. So it's just interesting because it's so different for everybody.
Okay. And what did you major in?
Well, that was complicated because I changed a few times. One of my many problems is I'm just interested in too many things, and interested in everything, and I didn't have enough self-knowledge to know really which direction to move in. So I started out, when I got to Steubenville, I had a dream of becoming a missionary doctor. That way I could get married, have children, be a missionary, and live a radical life for the Lord, and sort of have it all. Like that was just like the have it all dream. Yeah. And that was my dream going in. So I started out biology. As a biology major with a pre-med emphasis. Boy, it was too much science. I mean, all those days in the lab, I was like, I like this, but I don't love it. So I switched out of that. I ended up graduating with a double major in theology and history, and a concentration in catechetics. Oh, wow. So, which ultimately just means I took way too many credit hours every semester trying to change majors and complete in 4 years, and it's just.
You completed in 4 years?
Yeah.
Wow, double major.
Because I'm a crazy person. It took, like I said, way too much.
And then the religious calling, or did you work a little bit after school, or what?
Yeah, a religious calling. I did work for a year before I entered or was it 2 years? I guess, nearly 2 years. But yes, it was stirring at those years at Steubenville. And what happened was, again, not being exposed really to religious as a young person in junior high and high school at all. I never thought about it. And now suddenly I'm in this wonderful Catholic environment, and it's run by friars, and they're religious just everywhere. And so I'm seeing this really for the first time. And also, at the same time as I'm my eyes are being open to this possibility of religious life, another idea is dawning on me that I'm sure someone said along the way in my catechetics, my CCD classes, but it never registered for me until I'm there. The idea, the concept, the simple concept that God has a plan for our lives, that He created us for a purpose. Because I remember this is dawning on me. I thought, how did I miss that? Like, that's pretty big. Like, there's a purpose. Because I was operating as if I was just supposed to figure out what I loved.
Oh, right.
And just do what you love, figure out your passion and what are you good at and run after it. And all the major changing and all this, I was trying to figure that out. Just write the script of your life and then live it. That's what I was trying to do. And I thought that was a fine thing to do. And no one was dissuading me from moving through life in that way.
Does your dad didn't tell you need to study this? Or?
No, they were very hands-off, my parents. They were very hands-off. Very laid back about it and just really let us be free. And so then I'm realizing, well, God has a plan for my life, and I'm seeing religious people, and it's occurring to me like God's plan for my life could be this thing I see in front of me, religious life. And that, honestly, that scared me. That scared me. And
did you have much contact, were there TOR sisters there?
Well, I saw them, and even in the dorm that I lived in, there were the Martyrs of St. George and the TORs, of course, friars run the place, and the TOR sisters were starting there too. And the Carmelites study. There are a lot of religious communities send sisters to study. So you have sisters sitting there in your class and this and that. So, there's just sisters everywhere, as far as I was concerned. But I never engaged them. I would not go and talk to them. I wouldn't. I had a real hesitation, and it was fear. Looking back, I was afraid that God might be calling me, and it looked too foreign, too serious. It just looked serious and staunch, and I thought I'd surely be unhappy. That's the bottom line. I thought that life, I'm sure it's holy, and it's good that it exists. I'm glad there's such a thing.
I'm glad somebody's doing it.
I'm glad somebody's doing it, but I don't think I want to be that person. I really don't think I want to be that person. And so I had a strong resistance in me to it, out of misconceptions and all of that.
I remember I did a summer at Steubenville. Our pre-theology did some philosophy and some stuff. But they had Nashville Dominican sisters there, and they were rip-roaring fun. We'd be in the cafeteria laughing, and they'd be joking around and stuff. But we had a good time with them.
That's great. Yeah, you had a real image. It could be. Yeah, I should have engaged them. I can see now I should have just gone and talked to them.
Yeah.
But well, and the other reason is, and this is, at Steubenville, there are always more women in the student body than there are men. There's always more female population than male population. And so the fact is, I wanted to go to the spring formal, and said, if I'm not hanging out with the nuns, my dating life is over. So I really did try to keep that. Really, the question was in me, could I possibly be called? But no one was going to hear me say that out loud. That was my attitude. You better believe I'm not going to voice that, because I am planning to go to the spring formal.
So what happened? You worked a year or two, and what made you willing there?
So I was in a bit of an agony, this question, and thinking I probably wanted to rather get married and have kids, and kind of back and forth. I had no idea how to go through a discernment process of any kind. And
did you have a boyfriend, or were you dating?
I did. I was dating someone in the last 2 years of college, and that caused a lot of interior conflict, honestly. And I learned a lot about discernment, though, by doing that, because as I look back, I can remember I went to daily mass, like I said, and I see that God was giving me a grace of prayer, because I would remain there, and the Lord was giving me a gift. And it was a consoling time of prayer also. And in that consoled time of prayer after Mass, I wanted nothing but God alone. And I remember that strong feeling within me, like God is all I want. Now, if I had been paying attention to that, and also if I would have had a spiritual director, that someone I was sharing that with, it would have been really easy to piece together, this is a call to religious life. But I couldn't piece that together myself, and I was still too close to it. But when I was with my boyfriend, because I was still dating and yet experiencing a call, I wanted marriage. I wanted the normal thing. I wanted this love and affection, this kind of, the spousal relationship with someone, and to have found my own family with a husband. So that, we're out, marriage sounds great. I'm in the chapel, Lord, you're all I want. And it's kind of like this back and forth schizophrenic, interior experience for quite a while. So how did I get past it? I graduated and we broke up, and that was one seam, and still left with the interior question though, to the point where I was like, you know what, I don't know how I, am ever going to figure this out. I felt a certain desperation, like how am I supposed to how do people figure this out, And I remember I did have a devotion to Our Lady, and I'd made my total consecration to Our Lady the previous year, and I remember just interiorly going to her, which now I know is a type of Ignatian prayer, but I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about St. Ignatius and as a model of prayer, but imaginative prayer and seeing and smelling and feeling. And so in a very imaginative way, I saw myself as an infant, not even as a child, but as an infant in Our Lady's arms. And I said, Mother Mary, just carry me to the will of the Father. Just take me there. Like, I don't know how to do this. I don't even know what discernment is. Like, I can't, just this humility, finally, a little drop of humility to say, like, I really don't know how to do this, and I need help. I need help. I became a real beggar before Our Lady, and there's no doubt in my mind, she obtained the grace for me to know and to accept my call. See, my call was there. It was there. It was deep down, like we were speaking earlier today. It was in my heart, but I just didn't have the courage to go beneath the layers to get to that place and to accept it with faith. My trust in God wasn't strong enough. I see now. My trust in God, it had to grow. I wasn't trusting in, I didn't know him well enough to trust him. Right. So I gave it to Our Lady, and and she gave me the grace to be able to hear his voice with greater clarity.
And you heard about the CFR Sisters?
Yes. So they, in 1993, so I was at Steubenville between 92 and 96. And 93, as you remember, was World Youth Day in Denver. And when John Paul II came to Denver for World Youth Day, it was between my freshman and sophomore year at Steubenville. And we took something like 16 or 18 buses from Steubenville to Denver. And the CFRs came out from New York to help be spiritual leaders on the buses. And that's how I met the community. So this was years before all of this. And I met the community. And even though there's all these other communities around at Steubenville, when I met this community in 93, going to Denver, I was intrigued. And I was very attracted to them. And I met a number of them, Father Robert, Father Stan, different sisters as well.
Father Robert
Stanion, God rest his soul.
Oh, yeah.
One of the founding friars.
He was in Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I met him there.
Yeah. He was the first one I met. And I remember thinking, like, what am I encountering here? This is something special.
So you went to World Youth Day.
So what's World Youth Day? Yeah.
And what was that experience like?
Well, I love it in the sense that, John Paul II really became my hero. So I look back on that as a great moment of being with him. But I didn't get into any of the events. You have all these major events, and everybody has all the memories of being in like Mile High Stadium with John Paul II.
Yeah.
And but it was by lottery. There were more people than could fit in the stadium. So our group, I didn't get in. Like, I didn't get into anything.
Wow.
So
you were at Cherry Creek State Park.
Yeah, it was at Cherry Creek State Park. Yes, and that was awesome. Truly awesome. Yeah. But all in all, it was a beautiful experience, and just being in the presence of John Paul II was amazing. But meeting the community that I would live my life with was also amazing.
Yeah. And at that point, it was just the brothers, right?
Well, there were sisters also.
Oh, there were?
Yeah,
Okay.
there were sisters. So then getting back from that, at Steubenville, everybody's discerning something, and everybody wants to know if you're discerning. And so you'd often get the question, like, oh, are you thinking about religious life or whatever? And my kind of standard pat answer for that was, well, I'm open, which I really wasn't open, but I'm open. But God's not calling me to that, I don't think. But if he was calling me, I would join the CFRs. Like I just had this kind of sense of it. But it always had uncertain there, but I don't really think he's, calling me.
Right.
So then later when I knew that he was calling me, they're the first people I called. And then I went out and visited. And so all that statement, my kind of pat statement became true.
Yeah. So eventually you felt like you were called. So you went to the CFRs and visited and.
Yeah.
And
and it was very fast from there.
Yeah.
So that grace that Our Lady obtained for me, it was the month of May when I made that meditation and asked for that favor. The end of May, I was at Steubenville for a young adult conference. And it was Pentecost Sunday. It's 1998, which, as you might remember, John Paul II designated as a year dedicated to the Holy Spirit.
Oh.
So it's a year of the Holy Spirit, Pentecost Sunday.
Oh.
I'm at Steubenville. Now I'm a graduate, but I'm there for the young adult conference. And it's this huge Mass. And at the elevation of the Blessed Sacrament at Mass, I had an experience where I just knew. I knew something in every cell of my being knew that Jesus was the only one that would satisfy my heart, that I was looking in all the wrong places. And it was a very crystal clear knowledge. It was a knowledge that was given to me. It wasn't that I heard words, but a knowledge. And I suppose it was the Holy Spirit saying that to me, because he said, Jesus is the only one that will satisfy you. So Jesus wasn't saying it.
And looking back on it now, how would you explain that to someone, that only God could satisfy you, and what that meant looking back?
Yeah. That's a great question, Father Mark, because I still reflect on those words all the time. That was 25 years ago, 1998 Pentecost. On this Pentecost, I really was reflecting on it. And it's interesting, at the time, 25 years ago, I immediately knew that it meant I was called to be a sister. This was the answer to that question. But I also knew that it was a promise, like he's going to, he means to, he intends to, he wants to, he desires to satisfy my heart. And that what I'm looking for, what I desire, is going to be fulfilled in him. Right. So it was a promise. And when I got to the community and I was filled with joy, and there's joys and there's sorrows and there's struggles and there's formation and there's crises and you go through it all. But I've always experienced the reality. I've never doubted my call. I've never doubted my call, and I've never doubted that promise. But the way I experience that satisfaction, that satiation now, 25 years later, is so much more full and more complete and more total. I know that he doesn't just mean to satisfy my emotions or my longing for spousal relationship, like that he'll be my spouse or that he'll give me spiritual children. Like he means to make me one with himself for eternity. And so I know it in the biblical sense of knowledge much more deeply now, and I know I will always into eternity. So it's like a promise that's still with me and still being fulfilled, if that makes sense.
And yet still there was trials, right? Maybe temptations to leave. And you told me it was a funny story. I don't know if it was funny, but it was powerful. Now I'm forgetting what it was. But you felt you were going to leave.
Yeah. Well, when you're in a small and a young community, there are moments like that. Where you wonder. You wonder.
Yeah. Maybe there's better communities out there.
Yeah. Or just is it gonna make it?
Yeah.
Is it gonna make it?
Yeah.
And so I did go through. I would say more than one. I would say two. There were two pretty significant temptations to leave and go elsewhere, and both times the Lord in His faithfulness. And I have to make that clarification. It's not that I doubted my call. I knew I was called. But it's like, am I going to live this here now? Right. Or, so it was a temptation to leave. And the Lord made it clear in such a beautiful way, and this is God's goodness and His respect for us, that He made it clear that I was free, that I was free. And that's important because He always respects our freedom. meaning not like, if, okay, you'll leave and then I'm going to punish you. I'm never going to love you again and you'll never
Right.
receive blessing. But
Right.
no, he made me know that I really was free.
Right.
He's meaning I'm not going to lose his love or his favor. I might lose my vocation, but I'm not going to lose God,
Right.
you know.
And that was just an interior sense?
Just an interior sense. And
Yeah.
it just made me know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Because sometimes you could stay like in maybe bad marriages or marriages you shouldn't stay in, that abusive. It might be a fear of some kind, that. And I always feel for sisters that way more because, like a priest maybe leaves religious life. He can be a diocesan priest probably. And, a sister's 40s and 50s, it's harder to,
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. But it's, yeah.
And the children, was that a big issue? Like you wanted to have children? And I know some women really wrestle with that, but.
Yeah, for me, marriage and children all went together as one. That was the big struggle in the college years, and that was that back and forth between, okay, I'm dating, this could result in a beautiful marriage, but wait a minute, there's this call. So it was marriage and children for sure. And yeah, I mean, there's nobody that's not, if it's just such a natural desire. But I also remember, in fairness though, because the Lord was already operating, I remember taking a Scott Hahn class, the Christian marriage class with him, a night class, and we were reading the document on Christian marriage and other things as well. And I was reading Edith Stein for some reason. I don't know if it was for that class or for another class. Oh, I remember I took the Christian marriage class because I was trying to talk myself into this vocation. I'm seriously this call. I'm like, no, I know I'm going to be called to this. I know I'm going to be called to this, And but anyway, I'm reading Edith Stein, and she had a beautiful line about the children. Oh, goodness, I'm not going to get this right, but it's about something about spiritual motherhood, and it really moved my heart.
Right.
And I put that up against, next to what you learn in Christian marriage about, the unitive and the procreative aspects of the marital union, and how children deserve to be like in this loving, and I remember thinking about all the children who do not come into this world in that way. And I thought, and I remember this desire in my heart, like, I want to mother those children. Like, how many children are already in this world that did not come through this beautiful understanding of Christian marriage and self-gift and selflessness and self-sacrificing love and openness to life. That's a beautiful truth of our faith and a beautiful goal and ideal, and it's what it is. But how many have never known that? And so this desire for spiritual motherhood awakened in my heart then. And then later reading Edith Stein, that's where Edith Stein comes in, I saw that she had written on that. So that desire was growing simultaneous to the natural desire of wanting to have my own family like anybody would.
Yeah. And that, I guess we can come back to that in a second, but I guess we kind of cut you off. You said you felt free, you could leave if you wanted, but what made you want to stay? So God made me know that I was free. So that's very important. But he also made me know that if I walked over the threshold of the convent, which I was free to do, and I wouldn't lose his love, I would be stepping outside of his will for me. And I just knew it, and I can't explain that knowing. That's a gift of grace in that moment, but it's a very clear gift of knowledge. Right.
And I'll never forget that night, that evening when just the realization washed over me. It was a severe temptation to leave. Like my bags were packed, my room was clean, like I was going to go. And the knowledge of that came over me, and I made the decision to stay. I said, I will not walk out of God's will. Like, I choose to stay. And I remember I set up we're getting ready for the next day, and set up the coffee in the kitchen to go off the timer the next time. And I remember setting up the coffee, and I thought, and I often would think about it later, say, setting up the coffee, it saves your vocation. Like, just do the next good thing that you're supposed to do. Save my vocation, just do the next thing. Because I felt the same, pretty much. Emotionally, I felt the same. And
do the next right thing.
Just do the next right thing, and you're going to get past this. And that's been true in my vocation.
And then let's jump back to spiritual motherhood again. Picking your brain here, we got time, I guess. But how do you see that? How would you explain that to someone? Like prayer, interceding, suffering with, or how do you see that?
Yeah, that's all of the above. All of the above for sure. And I remember the novena, the Divine Mercy novena that starts on Good Friday and ends on Divine Mercy Sunday. And there's prayers for each day. And if any of the listeners have seen that, the wording of those prayers is very interesting. One year I was doing that novena, and the word bring to me really touched me. Bring to me. And it's Jesus saying to St. Faustina and whoever does the novena, bring to me, all those who are lukewarm. Bring to me all those who do not know me or who have rejected me. Bring to me. And I started to reflect on that bring to me, because here I am sitting in a chapel in New York City, and Jesus is saying to me, bring to me. And I just started to think about the capacity of the heart in prayer to bring souls to Jesus. Isn't that mystical and wonderful? Like, how is it that I can bring to you Jesus? How is it that I can bring to you through my prayer? And just the mystery of the economy of grace in prayer. And so, yes, intercession and what I learned, and I think the Holy Spirit was teaching me then, and has continued to teach me in different ways, that the heart is like a maternal womb. We think of the womb carrying life in the body physically, but the heart is a womb. And we're meant by our prayers to carry to term souls and let them be born from us through our prayers, through our sacrifices, and through accompaniment too, for sure. Yeah. And there's people, and you've experienced, I'm sure, in your fatherhood, your spiritual fatherhood, that there are times when someone's just given to you to care for, to accompany. Maybe they come to you for spiritual direction, maybe just for advice, maybe it's a postulant under your care in religious life. Young people we're working with. But there's some, then there might be a whole group of them, but there's some that they're drawing more from you. And they're a spiritual child, and God entrusts them to you to guide them and to assist them. And so it can have a broad sense of just this intercession that can be for the whole world or for a certain cause within it, the unborn, or something within it, and you're a mother in that way. But then it can be very, very specific for souls that he sends you very, very directly.
Right. And I'm sorry, did you say that was your idea about the womb and the heart? Or I've never heard that before. That's really
the Holy Spirit was just showing me that, especially through that word bring. That was where the insight came through the Divine Mercy Novena. When I read that word bring, and then just reflected on, how am I going to bring you? My heart is a womb. My heart is a womb to bring you.
I've never heard that. That's really beautiful. I was watching The Chosen. Have you seen those at all?
I've seen a few. I haven't seen any in season 3 yet, though, so I'm really behind.
Yeah, this was the one where Mary brings Mary Magdalene back to Jesus. Like, she had relapsed and was in some neighbor town. They went and got her, and she came back, and then it was Mary, the one that brought her literally into the tent where Jesus was staying. And I was like, wow, these Protestants are really good. And I've heard some very good Mariologists talk about, like, that's the way they like to see the Blessed Mother, as standing with us at the foot of the cross, interceding, opening for our hearts to be open to receive this grace. And I don't know, it was something about, I could see how, like, a Protestant would read the scriptures and just kind of physically see it that way. But I thought too, there's like a deep theology there. It's what you remind me of, the bringing too. And it's like, that's hit me more the last few years as a priest, and the power of the sacraments. Just like a few weeks ago, I was at a parish preaching, and I was just telling the people, just come to confession. I know. Whatever, you might be afraid, or you might wonder, how's this going to go, what's going to happen. Just come to confession. I mean, obviously you want to prepare and everything, but some people are at the point of just, they're frightened by it, or scared, or they're worried they might not be warmly welcomed or somewhat judged, or whatever it is. Just come. And it's like, just come in front of Christ, and in front of the mystery of Christ. It's almost not like these hard and fast lines of his physical body and I'm over here, but just that mystery of Christ that you're being drawn into, and just come to adoration. Just come and sit before him in adoration, see what happens. That grace is being poured out. It's like, I was at a Protestant funeral one time, and the guy, the pastor, he was going on about works, faith at works, and it kind of hit me when he was talking. He was attacking what their view of the Catholic position is, but I remember it hit me. He said, this is why I think of it, is that, the sacraments, because they look at it, okay, you're doing these ritualistic works, just have this personal relationship with Jesus, you're saved, whatever. But in the sacraments, like these places of encounter where Christ is working on us. Come receive the work of Christ. That paschal mystery of our redemption, present in the sacraments. He's doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
He's like reviving this dead corpse back to life in confession. The Eucharist, he's the one sustaining us and drawing us into his life.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, so
Amen.
I like that bring and come. That's
Mm-hmm,
good.
mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yeah, and it just grows, for women, maternity, motherhood is the key to our identity for every woman, just like paternity is the key to the masculine identity. And it's underdeveloped, it's underdeveloped, but there's a real depth to what God wants to do in and through women through their maternity. It's spiritual motherhood.
And in my observation, it seems like it is like a labor pain, isn't it? It's like a giving birth that just, we saw that with Mother Angelica and the network, and, just all these different sufferings, just mysterious sufferings would come and go. After she had her strokes, her asthma left her. She had this terrible asthma like in the 90s. Had her strokes and the asthma was gone. She had the back pain, the crutches for all those years. She had a healing there, but then got hit with strokes and then bedridden for years. And so, yeah, I think obviously with her, the growth of the network and everything, it was like, I think my view, I think God entrusted her with it, that a cloistered nun. It wouldn't be like your first choice, obviously, but she had this willingness just to be open, to carry the cross and see this thing through,
Exactly. What a great example. What a great example. Yeah, and just like with a family, with a natural family, our teaching, our Catholic teaching is so beautiful, but it's so strong, about, not using contraception, for example, that openness to life, and it's hard for sometimes in the culture, especially, obviously, but for our life, spiritually speaking, it's the same. Like we can't contracept. We have to be, we're called by God to this profound openness to the children he's going to send. And so in Mother Angelica, like you're saying, it's very unexpected. It's like, it's very unexpected, but it's like that's the child, if you will, that was sent. And so we're called, if we're going to preach this hard calling to families, we have to live it in our own vocation, this profound, this radical openness to the will of God in whatever form that comes in. And with labor pains, suffering is an important part of it. It's an important part of our life to receive suffering well, to live suffering well. Not so much for ourselves, but for our children. This is how new life, spiritual life, comes into the world too. Like there's prayer and suffering. Like when we get to heaven, we'll be people who prayed and suffered for us to receive those graces. And
I think about sometimes too, like the people that have this hidden suffering. They're not a priest. They're not recognized as maybe religious or something. It's just like this. Like the other day, I was with a woman that just had this constant back pain, that was just like, and, I don't know how many people that she has in her life encouraging her or whatever. In fact, in the world, you tend to get more isolated, right? You get sicker and people don't want to fool with you as much or whatever. And I think of like that group of people that persevere and are faithful with no kind of acknowledgement, praise, or and they live by that kind of faith. That's powerful.
It's very powerful.
The other thing that strikes me too about just this thing about bring to me, that I did a baptism last Sunday, and the child was like 2 weeks old, And at some point you anoint the chest and the crown of the head. And I remember just like touching his chest. It was like he felt so fragile. There's like no muscle, right? It's just like a little bit of fat, and it just struck me as like so unbelievably fragile. And then the mother like held the child over the baptismal font. She did it perfectly. She angled him a little bit, into the water, so the water hits the forehead and just goes off the back of his head. I was like, but it was funny when she held him like that. Everybody around just smiles. They just see something. I mean, I was smiling, and I'm not a big liturgical smiler, right? But the mother smiles, and then everybody around. There's something about that fragileness of life that's entrusted to, this family, this couple, and you think about it, like spiritually, Mary is bringing us. We're that weak, we're that dependent.
Yes.
That's how she must see us. I mean, we could be so corrupted by our sins and everything, but would like to think that she'd still see us as someone so fragile, messed up, got torn up by the world, whatever happened in their life, family of origin, and maybe horrible decisions, But still, it's like, forgive them, they know not what they do. And Mary's like the good mother that's holding this precious gift right in her hands. And
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that she sees us that way, and yes, can bring and will bring, is bringing us. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, Father Andrew Apostoli is your founder of your community.
Yes.
And tell us about something of his spirit that inspires you. And
Well, Father Andrew, let's see. My goodness, Father Andrew was one of the most joyful people and consistently joyful people I've maybe ever known. Very, and yeah, he would come to the convent consistently. He was dedicated to us all, and as we grew, 1 convent, 2 convents, 3 convents, he made it a point, like in a week's time, he would be getting to each convent to say Mass. So he spent his time with us, and even though as busy as he is with all of his books and his The Cause for Fulton Sheen and trips to EWTN and the Blue Army Shrine, spent a ton of time with it, and all the things that he did in his apostolates, he was very devoted to us and to being with us. So what strikes me is just his simplicity of his dedication to presence. And his ability to be present to us, because he would sit at the breakfast table after Mass, as if he had nothing else to do in the day. We would just be talking and laughing, and I reflect on that now as in the busyness, being in the role that I'm in. I do not sit at the breakfast. I rarely even eat breakfast, and if I am there, like, I'm quickly on to the next thing. And sometimes, and I do it, I hopefully do it gracefully and perfectly, but I think about him sometimes. He wanted to be with community. He was a community man. He wanted to be around the brothers, when he was with the brothers, and around the sisters. So that witness of just loving the brethren, it strikes me. It strikes me, and the joy that he had in it. And maybe it strikes me in part because it's not my strongest point of all the aspects of our life. For me, it's a weaker point. And for him, it was a very strong point. And it's beautiful, beautiful that how much he loved community. And the joy he had just to shoot the breeze and tell his jokes and just to be just natural and he was just great.
I got to go to Lourdes with him just that summer before he passed, and he was in a wheelchair but sometimes he was pushing somebody else in the wheelchair. It was like funny. But I remember having lunch with him. Yeah, he gave you that quality. He wasn't in any hurry. If he didn't make whatever plans, we come up with or whatever, that was fine. He was just very accepting but yeah, he was a joy, and just simplicity, commitment to the life. Just seemed just radiated being a friar.
Yeah, faithfulness. He was just utterly faithful to what the commitments are. If he was supposed to do it, prayer-wise especially, he did it. Yeah, he was faithful.
One of your strengths, though, is communication, isn't it? I know, like on the mission trip.
Me?
Yeah.
Personally,
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I'm a communicator. Yeah, you want to talk, I can talk. Yeah.
Because I know on this mission trip, there was like, how many, 5, 6 of us or something, but you always wanted to get together,
Yes.
and sometimes before and after stuff. And that's been something you've learned from experience, or is it?
Well, the mission trip is unique in that, here we are in Africa, and it's a vulnerable situation in every way, and there can be some dangers and different things, and it's challenging. So in that setting, I just have made it a priority we have got to do this as a team. Uh-huh. And in order to be a team, sometimes people that don't know each other very well at all, right. We're going to meet every day to connect. So it is a particular, like a mission intensity. Mm-hmm. So at home, like, I've got it, like the elements of community, but it's just not my strongest. Mm. It's not my, the fraternal aspect of, because there's a solitary element in me as well that I really love.
You kind of recharge by yourself.
Yeah. So that's more. Yeah. But with Father Andrew, he really ran towards the brethren, so to speak, and I admired that.
Yeah, I wanted to do this little quiz show with you.
Uh-oh.
You were giving some talks on prayer in the Ethiopian mission, and then I wanted to get a copy. And with these notes, you also had some reflections on Teresa of Avila, the Way of Perfection. And I was struck by the stuff you highlighted. Like you would write out these big quotes, and then you would highlight. Like the first one is, to get to know God's friends is a very good way to getting to know Him. And why did that strike you?
Yeah, I think that struck me because I've been realizing more and more, and this goes back to the community thing we were just talking about, but I realize more and more how individual people really do reflect some dimension of God in a really profound way. Right. And how community life draws that out. So I found it beautiful the way she succinctly said that. Getting to know God, you can get to know God by getting to know His friends.
Yeah, you highlighted too, if you serve God as you should, then you will find no better relatives than those servants of God He sends you.
Yeah, that's also striking because, especially when you discern religious life and enter it early on, you're just plagued with the thoughts of what, and especially who you give up. Mm-hmm. Who you give up, and you just don't relate in the same way with your family and your friends, but how God does supply. Right. And I guess 25 years in, I realize how true that is. Yeah. And how the depths of relationship grow in community in such profound ways. Mm-hmm. So I think part of it's like, it's the 25 years in review moment kind of thing, like where you look and think, wow, this is all really true. Like the promises are true. Yeah. It just takes a while to kind of, for the fruit to get sweet, And
that's promised in the gospel, right? If you leave family, friends, you'll be given these and more. And then just a simple line says, we must practice detachment. And I think you all do that well, brothers and sisters of your communities.
Did I have that highlighted?
Yeah.
Detachment.
Yeah,
this is like my examination of conscience, and now you're reading it back to me.
I feel like that's a struggle every day, a monster struggle.
It is a struggle, and it probably highlighted for that reason. Like, there's no way, because it's striking too with those kind of principle things that the greats, like St. Teresa of Avila is such a great saint. Yeah. And when she writes something, she writes it with this authority. There's this authority. Yeah. And so you read it and you're like, there's no skipping steps here. Right. There's no skipping steps. And I think for a long time in my own spiritual life, I really wanted to skip steps. Mm-hmm. All that wonderful seventh mansion stuff sounds great. It sounds great. But all that detachment stuff sounds horrible, frankly. Right. And then it's just striking that, but you just can't skip it. You got to embrace it at a certain point and live it.
You highlight this one. We have come here to die for Christ, not to practice self-indulgence for Christ.
That's just because it's so darn funny. She's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Self-indulgence for Christ.
I wonder, it sounds like, I guess she would use irony, right? Or sarcasm.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
She said, if you can bear something, do not talk about it.
Yeah, so great. I highlighted a lot of those things that I thought, I need to bring this into the teaching at the convent explicitly, you know.
Learn to suffer a little for the love of God without telling anyone about it. And then, one here too, it says, you know, if it's a serious enough illness, you know, people will know. They'll see you suffering.
Yeah, it's going to manifest itself soon enough.
Yeah. But, it's that all-in thing. But, too, I think the beauty of, like, recognizing the importance of friendship. And I guess she had John of the Cross and is it Peter Alcantara?
Yes.
Or something. Yeah, and I know that's been a big blessing in my life, too. Yeah. I think really, like just experiencing like the love of God through others, you know, that they form one piece, love God, love neighbor. And that's been a big source of healing and like believing God can love me.
Yes.
You know, if this guy, if we're friends, then I can be friends with God.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
There's sometimes it has to come through a human form. And that's, I guess, the whole point of the incarnation, but it's still true incarnationally in our own relationships.
Right. Well, once as she surrendered her will to him, what does she have to fear? So once, I guess, the soul surrenders their will to him, what does he have to fear?
Yeah, I love all the quotes that are like just total abandonment, that idea
Yeah.
that when you're really given over, it's over.
Yeah.
Like fear is over.
Yeah.
Like, that's the free fall, I like that. I want that.
There's that great speech in 12 O'Clock High or something. It's like a World War II movie about this fighter squadron, and the commander's trying to, to get the guys motivated, and he said, the problem is, you haven't accepted that your good is dead. You think there's something still to live for or something. And I thought, that's very true in Christian life. You have to die to yourself, die to the world. And like I'm holding on to this stuff, and then I lose my freedom, right? When I really die to all that, then I can be free.
Yeah, amen.
It says, the life of a good religious who wants to be among God's closest friends is one long martyrdom.
Yeah, you don't put that on the flyer. It's not like your banner on your website or something.
I remember Padre Pio, he said something like we shouldn't even pray. A religious shouldn't pray to be healed or relieved. You should willingly suffer.
I have to say that has a little bit of a resonance within me. I got to say that. I know it's not popular. I know that is not a popular opinion. But I get that. I mean, who, if not us, because if you think about it, because healing is a big thing right now, healing is just a big topic and people are really running after healing. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm not, God does heal and he heals, and it's wonderful when he does, and we glorify him when he does, and he should be praised for it. But we're in a special category, I think we're in a special category, and if we're given something, it's a special opportunity to be united to his passion. Like, what is more precious than that? Now, I mean, religious get healed too, and that's wonderful when that happens. But when it doesn't happen, I think there's something glorious. I think there's a gift in that, when we have a little something to endure.
Contemplation is a divine union where the Lord delights in the soul, and the soul delights in the Lord.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, that intimate sharing among friends. And you think, and sometimes maybe we have trouble believing that, right? That God would delight in me. And
yes, exactly. Just that mutual indwelling. That's really the bliss that we have here. That's, some of the saints write about all the way to heaven is heaven. That's a quote. It's either Catherine of Siena or I think it is Catherine of Siena or somebody. But other saints talk about that heaven starts now. But that quote, I think, really exemplifies that.
Yeah.
That we're in him and he's in us and delighting in one another.
Yeah.
If that's going on here on earth.
Yeah, it seems like it makes prayer a lot more simpler, doesn't it? All our troubles come to us because we do not have our eyes fixed on the Lord. I remember one of the sisters told me that one time about just, keep our eyes on Jesus, keep walking forward. And I found myself telling others that too. We get tangled up with other things and are worried about outcomes and things, and our job is just to keep our eyes on Him.
Yeah, so simple.
Yeah.
So simple, yes, not easy.
What does it matter as long as you are in God's arms? He is powerful enough to free you from everything. Only once did He command the world to be made, and it was done. We're always in His arms, right?
Yeah, I love that when I wrote the first part of that on the front of my notebook that had all my Teresa of Avila notes in it. Like, what does it matter if you're in His arms? Like, what a great thing to remember.
Yeah.
Whatever the trial or the tribulation, to just, again, to use the imagination, like you're resting in the arms of God. So what? Let it crumble. Let it crumble.
Yeah. Well, these are all great. I look forward to reading more of them and see what you highlighted. But thank you so much for talking.
Oh, you're welcome, Father. It's a joy.